the show.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
I've been going through your journey, and it's very intriguing how you managed to find time to write so many books amidst your corporate career. And we'll really get to that. So tell me more about your journey and how do you manage your personal passion and your professional interests?
Yeah, so I was working for a .com back in 2000, and they ran out of money. And so around Christmas time, believe it or not, they actually shut down. And I had just gotten my first book contract, so I decided not to take a job, and I went independent instead. And it turned out I really liked writing, and I was pretty fast at it. I had some good editors, which are very important, who made me a lot better of a writer.
Yeah.
And so that first 2 years I was independent, I think I wrote about 6 books a year. So
Wow.
it just really became a motion for me, like a muscle. I got good at it. And it became something that really relaxed me in a lot of ways. Like I enjoy doing it.
Hmm.
So when 2014 rolled around and I finally took a job again, I decided that I wanted to still keep writing. And so I started self-publishing some books on
Hmm.
a lean pub. And Manning came to me and said, you know, a couple of these books you've done look really intriguing. We want to talk to you about kind of combining these because we would like to do another soft skills book to
Hmm.
replace the one that we've retired. And I said, you know what, that sounds fantastic. Let's jump in and do it. So it's a lot of doing it in my spare time, but it's not like work. So we just finished a vacation in Hawaii, for example, and I finished up a book. And you know, you're sitting out there and you're typing away on my iPad. People are like, "Oh, are you working while you're on vacation? Oh, that's so sad." I'm like, "No, I love this. This is what I want to do. I've got a Mai Tai right here, and I've got my book, and I'm finishing up, and it's sunny, and I feel great." So
Wow.
yeah, it's my hobby too.
Right, I can totally relate to that because we all need a creative outlet through which we can disconnect from our work and really find ourselves. And I think writing is that for you. And people cannot even read
Yeah.
6 books in a year, and you write 6 books, so that's commendable. I was reading your book and you talk about some very interesting strategies to really build your tech career. And I think that these skills are not something that people really talk about. They're just expected. When you enter the corporate world, you're just expected to behave like that. But nobody really gives you a training on all of this. And it's a highly underrated skill, I feel, just to build your own brand when you're entering the corporate world. So you talk about defining your success in the book, right? So how do you think people can define their success when they're just getting started in their career?
I I think there's a good structure for doing that. I've recently had some folks who stepped up from being an individual contributor into being management. And in some cases, they did it exclusively for the better job title, the promotion, the money, and they found they didn't like it. And I hate to see someone in a job they don't like, and they're like, no, I want to go back to being an individual contributor. And sometimes that's hard to work out, right? Because
Yeah.
you've already backfilled the position. So I think it's really sit down and look at what you want from life. And it doesn't have to be forever. It's like,
Yeah.
what do you want from life right now? What kind of house do you want to live in? What kind of family do you want to have? What kind of vacations do you want to take? Do you like to eat out all the time, or do you like to cook? Like, what is it about that life? Then figure out how much money does it take to make that life work, and
Mm-hmm.
then find a job that makes you that amount of money, ideally that you like, and then stop. Like, don't take promotions and stuff past that point. If your job is servicing the life you want, then you've made it. So
Yeah.
it's really not about the rat race. It's not about just, you know, the job for the job's sake and the title and
Mm.
the money and all that. Those are there for a reason, and you got to figure out what you want from them so that they can get it for you.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful that you're talking about things like these because today we're just running after the promotion and the hike without even realizing if we really want it because it's just out there. It's like a trophy that everyone is trying to win, but no one really takes the time to think if that is what success means to them. But then, do you think that at any career stage, if people are not liking what they're currently doing, should they look for a switch or should they wait and be patient about it? How should they navigate through that?
I think there's a couple of ways you can look at that. If you're in a position that you don't love, but you can see a path to loving it, like you could see, look, if these things were changed, I think, you know, not only would I love my job better, maybe some of my coworkers would love it better too. And if you feel you're in an organization that is open to that change, then you can kind of lead to that change and you can make that and you can create a better place, not only for yourself, but for other people. However, if you're in an organization where you're just unhappy and you don't see a path to happiness, you don't see a way that they would be open to change, then you should try and go. You should try and get a job that will serve your life, where you can be happy and where you can do what you want to do.
Right. And one specific thing that I'm interested in here is, as an individual contributor, a lot of us are individual contributors in our work when we start. So as an individual contributor, how do we stand out? What are the strategies that we can use to stand out? Because the misconception usually is that you just have to do what is given to you and that's it. So you just put your head down and work and that's done. But it's really not it, right?
So it's funny. I talked to a bunch of human resources type leaders across some large enterprises, and you know how big enterprises do it, right? If you're a software engineer, you're like a level 1, a level 2, a level 3.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you consider to be the difference between those levels? And they said, well, we actually write it down. I said, oh, well, that'd be fantastic. Can I see some of that? And they shared it with me. And what's funny is on these definitions they have of level 1, level 2, and level 3, there's no technology mentioned at all. It's not about your tech skills. Your tech skills don't make you stand out. It's communication skills, it's teamwork, it's team leadership, it's all those soft skills. Those are the things, surprisingly, that are really, really hard to find. Finding good technical people isn't actually that hard in the world. A lot of companies make their own technical people by having really strong skill up programs. What's hard is to find someone who can communicate well, who can present themselves well, who can rally a team, even if they're not a team leader, who can get a team to bond together and work harder, and not necessarily harder, but more efficiently. So it is those soft skills. Those are the things that make us stand out.
Absolutely. And even if we don't have it at the time when we enter our career, we should really work on improving those, because no one comes and gives us a training for that, but it's really expected out of us as a professional. And that's where personal branding comes in. So how would you suggest that people build their brand in order to really showcase what they're interested in their professional careers, so that they can really attract the right opportunities to themselves?
Yeah, I think a key, particularly for technology people, is to be out there, participate in the technology world outside of your job. Our job is not, so I'm not sure if this translates globally, but in the US, we have kind of an idiom for blue collar jobs and white collar jobs. And blue collar jobs are ones where you tend to use your hands, right? It's mechanical, maybe you're a car mechanic or something like that. Those jobs, you can go home and forget your job. You don't have to really do much outside of the workplace. White collar jobs, on the other hand, these are things like lawyers and accountants and us, technologists. And when you go home from your job, you can't stop. Lawyers and accountants, for example, have mandatory training that they have to do, continuing education all the time. We have to do the same thing. And we have to be out there. We have to be participating in a community. And that's where you start to create your brand. Whether you're blogging or participating in a question and answer forum or participating in open source projects or really anything. Those are the things that let an employer see, a potential employer especially, see that you're a good communicator and you're someone who rallies a group of people toward a common cause. And that's where you really start building that brand. You can do it inside your current job, definitely, but it's not really visible outside your current job when that's the case. So it's really, really important to do those things, to be seen as a communicator. I have one fellow that I've worked with, not professionally, well, professionally, but not at work, right? We've worked outside of work together. And he said, I really want to contribute, but I don't know how, I don't know where. I said, well, you live in Spain, right? He said, well, yeah. I'm like, so you're so fluent in English. I assume you're fluent in Spanish too. What if you take some of these open source books that people have done on our topic and you just translate them? And that's a huge contribution, because now you're opening up that material to a big new audience. You're going to be seen as a contributor, as a communicator. You're going to showcase a skill that maybe doesn't get showcased outside of work. So that's a fantastic idea. And so he did. He stepped in and he did that. He helped a ton of people, and that raised his profile, that raised his brand, and he wound up being very successful. In part because of that. So never underestimate that even the smallest thing you do in a community can have a really tremendous impact, both on the world and on your brand.
Absolutely. And these days in this digital era, it's so easy to build your brand. You have so many platforms and people can really know what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, and you can define yourself through all of that. So your activity is constantly being monitored, and it's very easy to start if you just have the right intention.
It really does. And for anybody who says, I don't have the time, time management is also another very important soft skill. right? The ability to decide what's important, to prioritize, to assign it a little block of time. That's huge, and that's something we can all get better at. That's in the book too.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more thing that I'm interested in here is conflict resolution is one of the biggest thing that we all struggle with at our workplace, right? Because it's not necessary that all our co-workers or even our managers sometimes agree with what we have to say. And how we navigate through those conflicts speaks a lot about ourselves. It speaks a lot about our brand, because you cannot be immature and you cannot just let your ego get in the middle of all of this. So how do you successfully
Nope.
navigate through a conflict or any discouragement for that matter that you get from your colleagues?
Yeah, it's as easy as two words and as difficult as doing them. And the two words are seek context. Almost all conflict comes because the people on opposite sides of that conflict don't really understand each other's point of view. So, for example, let's say you're trying to propose something to your boss and you want to change something about the environment. You're going to your boss and he or she's just not receptive to it. Seek context. Ask them why they're not receptive, and it might be that because what you're proposing just doesn't fit with how the business functions. And that's an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about how the business functions, maybe change your proposal so that it better fits, and you can communicate it in a way so that people can see how it fits. But it's really that context. Just always remember, you don't know everything that's going on in that other person's head, and stop and try and find out what's going in their head, and then craft whatever it is you're doing to try and find a middle ground or common ground, so that you can move ahead. And that's really it. It's really hard, especially if it's a heated argument, to stop yourself and say, okay, you know what, let me just be humble and ask them, hey, what's going on with you? How is this landing with you? You know, it seems like it's not landing well. Can you help me understand why? Because even if we can't come to common ground, I at least want to understand why this isn't a good fit. And if you can be humble and go in that way, I think a lot more people are receptive and you wind up with a positive outcome.
Yeah, and that requires a lot of you trying to keep aside your ego and really thinking about the problem at hand. But in the end, it really shows them that you are a very good leader, because you're trying to take it very maturely, and it's not personal at the end of the day. And another thing that I want to understand from you is definitely we have our own career definition of success and everything, but it's very important to have a career development plan, right? So how do we draft that career development plan for ourselves? Maybe we have 5 years goals or 10 years goals that we set for ourselves, but how do we go about with it?
Yeah, I personally have never been good at multi-year goals. I find that as I start to set them up, things change around me long before I ever get that far. So I take what's called what I call a GPS approach. If you do a little bit of reading on how GPS algorithms work to get you from point A to point B, point A is where I am right now, and point B is the career that serves my life. That's my success. That's where I ultimately want to go. And you know what? Over the years, that changes. You know, maybe when you're young, it's in a certain place, but then you maybe get married and start a family, and so your success changes. That's totally fine. And GPSs are actually really good at dealing with that because they don't try to seek out the entire path. They really just look at what's next. And so when you punch in your route into a GPS, it starts by saying, okay, I'm here. What step can I take that will get me in that direction? And then what's the next step that will take me in that direction? And the next step that will take me in that direction.
Right.
So it's constantly making different decisions, but they're all trying to aim to that one place. And so that's how I've always done a career plan. This is where I want to be, but given where I am right now, what's one step, what's one thing I could do that would point me in that direction? And let me just focus on that. And when I kind of conquer that, then I'll figure out what the next step is. Because you can't predict all the things that are going to happen. And that way you're just focused on what you can do right now in a positive sense to get you to where you want to go. But you're very open and able to react. So if there's a traffic jam along the way, you can route around it because you haven't made this master plan that's suddenly thrown off.
Yeah, adapting to change as you go, but still aligning your short-term goals with the longer-term vision that you have for yourself. So I think that longer-term vision really is the key, because if you don't know that, you don't know what you're chasing. It's just a moving target that you are running behind. But in order to reach there, you really have to decide what's important for you.
Yeah, well, imagine how it would be if you got in the car and just started driving and you had nowhere to go. Like you might have a great drive, you might drive off a cliff, like you have no idea. Like you have to know what that destination looks like.
Absolutely. And another thing is we often don't talk about our accomplishments at work, right? Because we think that we're already doing the work, everyone is aware, and let the work speak for itself. That's the general tendency that a lot of professionals have. How do you think we can project our accomplishments effectively without really feeling uncomfortable about them?
think I think everybody, when you do something important at work, when you help accomplish something either on your own or as part of a team, it's important to do a little retrospective moment and
Yeah.
think about that. One of the things I talk about in the book is understanding your monetary value, because you get paid a salary or a wage, and that tells us how much we are worth to the company for the job that we do. And that's an investment on the company's part. And what we can do in terms of accomplishment is talk about the return that we created. So, I was big in PowerShell, which is an administrative automation technology. And I would tell people every time you automate a task, go and look and see how much time was being on that task beforehand, how
Yeah.
much money that required, how much time you spent automating it, and how much money that required as an investment, and now how much time you've saved, and talk about it in terms of money, because that's what drives a business.
Yeah.
And if you can learn to express your accomplishments in a way that makes sense to a business, which is typically going to be, money, increased revenue, decreased costs, things like that. If you can talk about your accomplishments in those perspectives, then they become universal. They become things that can go on a resume. They become things that you can talk about during a performance review, and they're concrete, right? It's not like, oh, I did a good job. You can tell. Well, I mean, can I saved the company this much money and generated this much in incremental revenue.
Yeah.
That's concrete. That's science. Like we can talk about that. You can't deny that. So
That's a
I
fact.
think that's an important ability for us all to have as technologists. Yeah, is to tie those accomplishments back to the business that we work for.
Right, absolutely. So just finding what the root goals are for that particular business and tracing your accomplishment to tie to that goal. That's a perfect strategy. I don't think anyone will be uncomfortable talking about it because you're just talking about the business, and that makes it very professional.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And another thing that I want to understand here is a lot of times we are not really vocal about our goals when we are working, either with our manager or either with our colleagues. We don't like to talk about what our goals are. So should we be transparent about even our personal goals for that matter? Should we be transparent about those goals in our workplace, or should we just keep them to ourselves? That's a dilemma that I've been having, and I'm sure a
I,
lot of people have.
I think you should be transparent about them. If you work for an organization where for some reason that's not comfortable, then you work for the wrong organization. I'm in a senior leadership position at my organization. I want to know where my team sees themselves in 6 months, a year, like what it is they want to be when they grow up, because I want to help. Like if someone tells me, you know what, I think I do want to move into leadership, I want to create some opportunities where they can experience that ahead of time, start gaining the experience, make sure that's what they want to do. And I want to help put them in situations where they can gain the experience they need to move on to whatever their next step is. And I try and tell my team all the time, your next step, I hope it's with me. And if it's not with me, I hope it's with the company. And if it's not with the company, I will write the recommendation letter for whatever company it is with. Like you as the person are the important one here. And I want to know where you want to go so that I can do what I can to help point you in that direction. Or I can be honest with you and say, you know what, I don't see that opportunity here. If that's truly your goal, we need to talk about, maybe your path is somewhere other than here. Like I want to be honest about that, because at the end of the day, it should be about the people, right? And if you think there's a little phrase I have, if you think about all the things we work on in technology, we build products and we build content, software and networks. In 100 years, none of it will matter. None of it will make any difference in 100 years. But the people will still matter, because they'll have started families and had kids, and in 100 years, their legacy will still be here. So let's focus on the people. So yeah, be transparent with your goals. Your leader should be helping you achieve those, however that turns out to be.
Absolutely. And I think the underlying idea for this, as you said, it's just treating your manager or people in your workplace as partners in your career growth? Because mostly we are intimidated by those people and we just feel that we have to talk about work all the time, but they are humans as well. And when you can talk about your goals and treat them as someone who can help you in your career growth, it can really make a difference in getting you closer to your goals. And then that again comes back to the longer term vision that you have for yourself, right? Are you really thinking about it?
Yeah.
So
So when you go on a job interview, and they'll always say, okay, at the end of the interview, do you have any questions for me? That's the question, is, hey, if I'm able to help you understand my career goals, are you willing, like, is it part of your job to help me line up for those, to help me understand what I need to do for myself? Can you coach me a little bit? And if they're like, well, no, that's not really my job, don't take that job.
yeah,
Like work for an organization that's committed to its people.
absolutely. An organization that can really value you as a person and not just sees you as a resource to get their work done, right? That's the difference. Yeah. And my last question for you, Dawn, is how can people truly own their tech career? What advice would you, if you were to give one advice to them, what would that be?
When I got into tech, and this was obviously ages ago,
Mhm.
I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a destination. My GPS was not set. I kind of bounced from opportunity to opportunity wherever there was a pay raise, like a lot of us do.
Yeah.
And what I call that is being the passenger in the car of your life. And I came to a point in around, it wasn't until 2003, honestly, that I really started thinking about sliding into the driver's seat and taking control and setting a destination for myself. And every decision I made after that was about that destination. And that's owning your career. That's looking at, okay, I want to go from point A to point B. Okay, the easiest step that I can see is just this little one right here, but I don't quite have all the skills I need. But because it's a small step, it's easier for me to see what I do need, where my gap is, what I'm missing. I can then take it on myself to fill that gap, move up to that point, and then I can start to see what's next. That's owning your career. That's driving your career as opposed to just being a passenger. It's knowing where you're going, knowing why you're going there, like what that's going to contribute to your life, and then and this is the important bit, taking it on yourself to make whatever improvements you need to make to take that next step.
Right.
Your boss, your company owns your job, right? They have to give you whatever you need to do your job. You own your career. Don't expect your company to help you with your career because it's not theirs, it's yours. So if you need additional skills, if you need additional experience, it's on you to find those and make the time and the space and the money to get that, because it's your career, and your career is going to do great for you if you do great for it.
Yeah, I think that's really great, and more people need to hear this today, because we are just going with the flow, and as opposed to that, we need to create our own wave. And if we can do that, we can have much better and fulfilling careers. So thank you so much for being with us today, Dawn, and I'm really excited for our winners to read your book. I'll send you all the entries and you can choose the winner yourself. We'll have 2 winners who'll win your book.
Oh, great.
But wait for them to read your book and really learn more about all of this.